would you take 70,000 today? And a lot of sellers would be like, yeah, I'll take my 70. And so now we've just created a payday four. We call it a payday four, which is now we just added $30,000 under our payday when the house closes. And then now we own the house forever, right? If we can pay them off 70,000, we're not concerned about the 48 months now. It's forever. We can rent it. We can Airbnb it. We can now sell or finance it ourselves. So there's many options. I don't know if you want to describe that, how that would work if we did that.
When you look at your portfolio and, whether you have a bunch of deals or not, you look at it and you say, okay, I can get the payday 3 and totally cash out of it at that time. And so that's cash right then. Or you can say, I'd rather have the monthly income from it. And you have enough spread in there, you can go ahead and spread that out over time.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Real Estate Junkies Coast to Coast. I am your co-host, Rusty Ham, on the West Coast. I have a fill-in co-host. Today, Steve is currently moving, so I brought in a co-host from the East Coast, Rick Abbiati. Rick, how are you?
Terrific, Rusty. How are you?
I'm doing great. Rick, you are on the East Coast. Whereabouts on the East Coast?
I'm in southern New Hampshire, right on the border of Massachusetts.
All right. And we're both in the Wicked Smart Real Estate Coach community. When did you enter the community?
Entered the community in May of 2021 and left my W-2 a few days short of 2 years later and became a coach in 2023.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. That's super important. We both left our jobs after we were in the community for a while and became coaches. So those of you that are listening, it is possible to leave your W-2. So awesome stuff. I know leaving the W-2 for you was nerve-wracking because of insurance for reasons.
Yeah.
But you managed through that. Awesome stuff. So again, our podcast is based on 3 pillars: mindset, skill set, and systems. Today, we're going to talk about the skill set of when sellers ask us who we are, right? Because when we call, Rick, I don't remember, we cold call, right? We cold call expires, cancellations withdrawn, or FSBOs. And when we ask them, hey, are you looking to sell? They always ask us, are you a realtor or are you an investor, right?
But yeah, all the time. That's normal.
Yep, all the time. What do you use? I have all scripts aren't the same, right? We have our own personalities, right? We have certain, like a general script, what we say, but over time, when you get more confident, you say it different ways. We're saying the same thing, but we say it different ways. So Rick, hypothetically, I say, okay, who are you? Are you a realtor or are you an investor? What is your kind of knee-jerk reaction to that?
My response is I am interested in buying. And usually what I do when I first call is I ask about their property and I say I'm possibly interested in purchasing your property. And they still come back and say, are you a realtor?
Yeah, they're not listening. So I love the way you said that because a lot of the associates will go on and on about who they are and how they buy and all that kind of stuff right away. You simply just said, no, I'm a buyer. And then you just be quiet, right? Yeah. So describe that. If you're coaching an associate, how would you coach them in that situation?
So I always tell students, start off right from the get-go. Just let them know you're interested in buying, because in a lot of cases that avoids them asking if you're a realtor, or they could ask, are you an investor? Even if you say I'm a buyer, they could say, are you an investor? Personally, I say yes. However, I don't flip or wholesale properties. I tend to pay full market value for them. And then I move on right into the next question.
Another super important thing that you said is you move on. You answer it confidently and you move on. Yeah, because investor, to me, I tell the students all the time that, saying that you're an investor has a negative connotation to it because of what you just said, which is, I'm not a wholesaler, which they're going to come in lower. I'm not a flipper who they're trying to get pennies on the dollar. We buy full market value, right? Price isn't a concern for us sometimes, but it really isn't a concern. Terms is the most important part. And when you get a certain amount of terms or a certain length of term, then price really isn't an issue for us. So that's why we're not that's where the stigma of being an investor doesn't sit well with us because we are buying the home. It's just going to be a delayed cash sale, right? Yeah, I say the same thing. I don't know. I'm a buyer. You're an investor. I buy home. And I don't say I am. I just say I'm a small family business that buys homes in the area. I pay full market value. So I try not to use the word investor, but if I do, I'll say it kind of what you said. Yeah, I'm an investor, but I'm not looking to lowball you or cut your legs from underneath you.
Yeah, what I've heard during some call critiques, because we critique our students' calls, and sometimes because that kind of throws new people off, they'll go right into, this is how I buy homes. And it's not the time to do it.
Yeah, I buy homes on terms, and we haven't gotten even to the motivation yet, or if they're even willing to sell at this point. And that's what I've been running into in call critiques is they're new, right? And they're nervous, right? They're nervous, and they think that the more that they explain, the more the seller's going to get it, and they're gonna say yes right away. We're actually looking for no's, right? I don't know if you've ever taught them that, but I tell the students all the time, we're actually looking for no's. We want them to, because they have no idea what terms is, right? Typically the seller has no idea what terms is. So we want them to be very curious. We want them to be like, I don't know what you're talking about. And then we're like, okay, this is how it would work. But this is going to be later in the conversation.
And it's good that you brought up the point about being nervous and going on into how you buy. But I look back when I first started, not only did I go into how we buy, but how we get our buyers and the whole buyer seminar. So what we do with the buyers.
Yeah, that's another half-hour conversation we can get into. So just recap on our warm-up. It is a skill set, right? It is answer confidently and then pivot immediately away from that. Hey, I'm a buyer. Anyway, tell me a little bit about your house. We don't necessarily want to ask them that because it opens up another can of worms. I have these great granite countertops and this and that. So we don't necessarily want to ask them about their house, but we want to pivot to the next question, right? Hey, are you still looking to sell? And then once you answer confidently and you pivot off of that, then they don't really come back to that, are you an investor or a realtor question. We just move on because we want to control the conversation. I don't know if you want to talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, it's best a lot of times if you answer a question with a question or answer the question briefly and then move right on to the next question. That takes the focus off of them and on to you.
Yeah, good stuff. Yeah, 'cause I wanted to come back to that because when we get into the buyers, we can have an whole podcast about talking about the buyers because our associates will, and bless their hearts, they want to explain everything to the seller thinking it's going to get them a deal when you're the buyer. Right. And I don't think most of the associates understand that you're buying the home. Whatever you do with the home outside of the contract that you have with the seller, it doesn't have anything to do with the seller. Now, if it's a lease purchase, it does. We're making those payments. So if something happens on the buyer side, the seller will never know about it.
Yep.
Awesome stuff. So speaking of pivoting, let's pivot to our game plan. We both have experienced this game plan recently. I currently have one, and then you just recently got one a couple months ago. We call it, again, the 4 game plans are lease purchase, owner financing, subject to buying the house, subject to the existing mortgage. And then we call it an executive lease purchase or an AO. We call it a sign out, which is we find the buyer and assign it back to the seller. So those are 4 game plans. We do have a 5th one that is rare, which is it's just a combination of buying the home subject to when they have equity, a lot of equity, and we're going to owner finance that equity and pay them out at a later date. So describe that because there's 2 different types of subject twos, right? So there's a lot of subject twos out there that people talk about when the seller is behind on payments or the equity equals the price of the home. What we are doing is we're running into people who have a lot of equity. So describe a subject to owner financing hybrid and what that looks like.
Subject to owner financing hybrid is just what it's called. We do a subject to on the existing mortgage. So we make the payments directly to the lender, just as we do in the lease purchase. And the difference being that equity that they have, we do an owner finance with them over a specific time frame or term. Now, with a sub 2, of course, subject to, there's no time limit other than the mortgage itself. But with an owner financing piece of it, it does narrow your term down a lot shorter. But there's many options to pivot at that point. You could either pay the seller off and keep the subject to in place and keep going with it, or you can pay the whole thing off and close it out for the payday.
Yeah. So just for those of you that may not know what a subject to, the mortgage is going to stay in the seller's name, and we're basically just going to service that loan. We're going to get their login information. We're going to pay the mortgage company directly. So that mortgage is going to stay in their name. The title is going to transfer to our company's name, and preferably you're going to transfer that into a trust. And then your company is going to be the beneficiary, I believe. And there's a few reasons why. Some people, well, why would you do that? That first scenario I talked about, which is they're behind on payments. So sometimes we catch them up, and we catch them up on their mortgage. So they're free. They're not free and clear, but their credit has been saved by us. And so now they can move on with their life and establish another home or somewhere, wherever they're going to live, or there's no equity in it and they just want to be done with the house. So we'll just take over the home, transfer the title. Like you said, there's no end date. It's almost like a buy and hold at that point. The seller, again, would have to agree that their name would be in the mortgage. So some kind of freak out about that. But if they're in desperate situations, they'll do it. In our situation, what we're talking about is we're going to owner finance the equity. Hypothetically, let's say it's $100,000 equity. We're going to agree on 48 months. Let's use hypothetical months here. We're going to say, okay, Rick, I'm going to take over your mortgage, and then title's going to transfer, and then we're going to agree on $100,000, and I'm going to pay that out on or before 48 months at 0% interest. Now, does that happen all the time? No, but we would love that to happen, right?
And one of the things that I used to have a hard time saying principal only, but one thing that seems to work really well is if they push back, I just play dumb and just say, the reason I offer that is because a lot of sellers, as soon as you talk interest, it attracts the IRS and you pay income taxes on that. So that's why a lot of sellers like the principal only. And then just kind of, if they want interest or whatever, then we work that out.
Yeah, we're not opposed to it. I'm not saying that we're opposed to paying interest on that. But like you said, there's tax advantages for just doing principal only. And then like you said, and we call it a payday 4, right? Hypothetically, we owe them $100,000 on or before 48 months, and we're 2 years into our term. We come across a deal. We've done a few deals. We got some money stashed away. We can call the seller back and say, hey, Rick, I know I owe you $100,000 in 2 more years. How would you take $70,000 today? And a lot of sellers would be like, yeah, I'll take my 70. And so now we've just created a payday 4. We call it a payday 4, which is now we just added $30,000 under our payday when the house closes. And then now we own the house forever, right? If we can pay them off $70,000, we're not concerned about the 48 months now. It's forever. We can rent it. We can Airbnb it. We can now sell or finance it ourselves. So there's many options. I don't know if you want to describe that, how that would work. If we did that.
When you look at your portfolio and, whether you have a bunch of deals or not, you look at it and you say, okay, I can get the payday 3 and totally cash out of it at that time. And so that's cash right then. Or you can say, I'd rather have the monthly income from it, and you have enough spread in there, you can go ahead and spread that out over time.
Yeah, and we call that a payday 2. So we have 3 paydays. Payday 1 is the down payment from the tenant buyer. Payday 2 is the spread that we create from the tenant buyer to our seller. And then the payday 3 is a combination of principal pay down on the loan and the markup that we have that we sell to the tenant buyer. And then when I say payday 4 is that maybe that extra equity that we've created by maybe paying off the seller a little bit earlier than normal, but at a lower amount that we agreed on at the beginning. Good stuff. Yeah, so I have one. I have one right now currently. The reason why this seller did his subject to owner financing is he was paying on two mortgages. One was $6,000, one was $4,000. So he was coming out of pocket $10,000 in mortgage payments. So he's like, I need this to stop, right? Because his house was empty. So he's paying on a house that was empty. So he said, I want 5% down. I was like, okay, 5% down. Subject to, so I owe this guy, I think $260,000 in 3 more years. In the meantime, I have a tenant buyer in there that's paying the mortgage and paying the mortgage down. So it's a really good situation. And I don't know, you were going to say something. I think I cut you off, but what were you going to say, Rick?
So, okay, yeah, I was just going to say the one objection that the seller may have to you, the mortgage remaining in their name, is, well, I want to be able to buy another house and I don't want to have 2 mortgages. And that's really easy to deal with, is you just let them know that's not a problem because that loan of yours is being serviced and it's paid monthly every time directly to the lender. And when you go to get another loan, they're going to look at the fact that you just show them that contract that it is being serviced. So they'll credit you your debt to income anywhere from 70% or more.
Yeah, super important. I think a lot of people don't understand that. They think, how am I going to get another loan if this one's still in my name? So very important information to tell the sellers that, hey, if we're going to service it, you got to show the lender that we're paying your mortgage for you. Therefore, that a lot of times, I think it's in the beginning, maybe first 6 months, they'll credit maybe 75%, like you said, towards your debt to income. But after a year or so, they may do 100%. They might just disregard that mortgage payment that you have because it's been serviced. And again, we're going to make those payments regardless of what's going on the tenant buyer side, right? So that payment's going to continue to be made and it's going to be in good standing all the time. So future lenders will be like, oh, okay, I can see this. It's in good standing. Awesome, Rick. So let's transition since I talked about a little bit about my subject to owner financing deal that I have one in the works. Hopefully that him and his partner will agree on the terms that we send. Me and Zach sent him a couple of options the other day. I think they're mulling it over. But you had a subject to owner financing hybrid just a couple of months ago. Describe the seller, what was their pain point, and why did they do it?
This particular seller, her and her husband, they were looking to relocate down south there, and she needed money for moving expenses, and she wasn't too concerned about the subject to portion of it, but she had equity, and we had structured it so it wasn't a large amount of equity. I believe it was like 100,000 or something like that, but she needed 10,000 to be able to relocate. So what I did is I looked at the payday one that we get, and I was able to take the 10,000 out of the payday one and give her that up front. Although I am going to get that back on the payday 3.
Right. So did you take that out of the equity? So, okay, I'm going to give you 10, but I'm going to take 20 out of your equity on the back end.
Yes. And additionally, she did not have the money for closing costs. She didn't anticipate that. So I went ahead and paid the closing cost, but I think I took twice as much off the back end on the payday 3.
Yeah, that again, we haven't really touched on closing costs. So let's reverse a little bit. Let's go back. Lease purchase, a normal lease purchase is around 36 months. So on or before 36 months, it turns into a traditional sale, right? Where the tenant buyer pays their closing costs and the seller pays their closing costs, right? So we need to make sure that we're telling the sellers that, hey, there's no commissions or fees, but at the end of the day, there are going to be closing costs, which, probably $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 in most cases.
Yeah.
But with subject to owner financing, you're closing on the property, right? Because title is transferring, you're closing. So you're going to have a closing date. And again, it's traditional closing costs. The seller is going to pay your company is going to pay your closing costs. However, and what you just said is, hey, I'll pay your closing costs if I can get that off the back end of the equity.
Right. Now, the other thing with this particular seller, she did want some additional money monthly aside from the sub 2. So the owner finance piece offer equity. And I had about 750, 780 somewhere in there fleet spread.
Mhm.
So what I could do is I could structure monthly payments to her, which I give her 461 a month, which she was very happy with. So it's a little bit more, yeah, it's a little more, yeah, principal only. So that comes off the equity. So again, we get it back into payday 3.
Yeah. So great deal. Cause then again, with mortgages, there's principal coming off on these monthlies anyway, right? You have your PI, your principal and interest on a traditional mortgage, and you have principal coming off of that. What Rick did is he added more principal coming off the purchase price. This sounds like a great deal because yes, I'm willing to give you 10,000, take it out of my payday 1, but I'm creating, we call it stacking. We're creating, yes, we're going to have to wait for our money, right? Just as like the seller's going to have to wait for their money at the end of the day. When you give money up front, you technically are waiting for the money, just like the seller is at the end of the day. So sometimes we prefer to have these things close sooner than later because we want the money. However, if you're stacking like Rick is, and he has multiple deals and he's stacking in different ways, lease purchase, AO, this one you could potentially own forever and continue to get that cash flow. And then when it does cash out, it's 6 figures. So are you willing to give up $1,000 to have 6 figures on the back end, which could be 3, 4, 5 years from now, right? Chris talked about his recent deal, right? He got it in 2014. It was a lease purchase and he pivoted to a subject to, and now he's closing out 10 years later and it's worth over $160,000. Would you be okay with, $160,000 coming to your bank when you weren't even really expecting it?
Yep. And you've got that monthly cash flow coming in the whole time.
Yeah, super important. Again, the more deals you get, and everyone knows if you're a real estate investor and you're maybe a buy and hold, you're looking for that cash flow, right? You don't necessarily want to buy and hold that's not producing cash flow. In our situation, sometimes we'll give up that payday 2 as long as the principal pay down is large. For me, example, my subject to owner financing hybrid, I have very little payday 2, but I have $2,500 coming off the principal every month, right? Because it's a 15-year loan at a 2.5% interest rate. So am I okay with no payday 2, but having $2,500, almost $30,000 a year coming off the principal of that loan? Of course, because by the time I sell it in 2 more years, it's going to be $150,000 deal. And am I okay with that? Of course. I just have to wait for it.
Yeah, I like that you mentioned coming out and being okay with not getting a payday 2, having the benefit of doing that. I remember one of my deals, by the time I got it, the property sold, we had a buyer in it. I had to come out of pocket like $25 a month. And I'm thinking, I have to come out of pocket every month. But when I look at across all 3 paydays, it was a 6-figure deal. So it's like, okay, I can go negative every month. It's not a problem.
And the huge thing about that too is with traditional investing, buy and holds, you have to come up with 20% down, typically 20, 25% down to buy the home. And then you're trying to find a tenant to produce that cash flow. Well, how long do you have to buy and hold to make up for that down payment you put down? It's cash on cash. It's going to take a long time. For us, we buy on terms. Typically, we don't put any money down. Like, for example, my first lease purchase was a $10 consideration fee. And I got a payday 1 of $83,000. So cash on cash, I mean, that it's okay. So I don't have a payday 2, or I don't have any cash flow. Who cares? I put $10 down. The payday 1 and then your payday 3, it's a no-brainer. But the way we buy, you just got to find the right sellers. And at the end of the day, you got to find a seller that's open to these ideas. They're open to waiting for their money, which a lot of sellers are not open to waiting. They want their money right away. There's always that conversation with them. Hey, these sellers that we buy from, they prefer it this way because they want to maximize. They don't want to give their money away in the front end. They're willing to wait. They're willing to maximize their house, money they have in their house, and they're willing to wait, right? And a lot of sellers don't get that. Like, why would somebody wait for their money?
And if the beauty of the way we have it with the 3 paydays, you could essentially do a down payment and not have any cash flow on your payday 2, but have a really good payday 3.
Right.
This gives you a lot of flexibility.
Yeah, that's what I like about this is we can do it either or, right? We can not put money down, or we can. Again, when I talk to the students, it's you got to look at the whole picture, right? Because when you do put money down, you're almost eliminating your payday 1, right? So you would want, typically you'd want to create some sort of payday 2 and have a really good payday 3. But like you said, if the payday 3 is 6 figures and I give money up front and I don't have any cash flow, am I okay with 6 figures in 3 years? And that's part of the stacking, right? Now, if you're a beginner and that's your first deal, maybe not. But if you're stacking like us and we have multiple deals in our back pocket, then that's something that, because then when you do that, again, subject to you're owning the home. So you get all the benefits, you get the depreciation, you get all these, not all the write-offs that we used to get, but you still get write-offs because you own an investment property, right? So there are benefits to doing a home subject to with the owner financing component. Awesome stuff. Let's end with the In the Trenches boot camp. We call it the ITTB. You've been a part of that a few times with the Wicked Smart community. The benefits of that and why are so many students excelling, right? They just love it, right? Because we used to go to the office. We go to the office visits with Chris in Rhode Island. And it was only geared towards high 6, people that have invested a lot of money. We would go there for a couple of days and we would and you and I both did it. They would go through our numbers and they would say, okay, you need this and this in order to grow your business. Now they've switched it up a little bit where we're making phone calls for associates live while you're there. And they also go through business plans and all that. So describe the ITTB and the benefits of the associates when they go.
Chris and Zach and the community, we set this In the Trenches boot camp up, and it really has served as a springboard for especially new people, but people who have been around for a while do, based on space available, come and participate. But the first day, we urge people to come in with leads, and we make the calls for them. And in this particular, the one we had last week, we came away with, it was either 3 or 4 deals out of that. And it's really great to watch, especially new people with their jaws drop when the seller says, yes, I'm open to terms, and you structure a deal right then and there. We make the calls on the first day with the new people that are there and talk about any hours or whatever that come from those phone calls. And it's really great to see the takeaways that people have listening to us make the calls for them. And then the second day, we go through various deal structures and random deal structure type stuff, systems and mindset and that kind of stuff. And then, of course, the third day is strategy, what you were just talking about, that we used to do is they look at your metrics. And a lot of these people don't have metrics, but some do. And we break that down looking at their why or their goals and then saying, okay, how many deals do you need to get to that point? And then we know it's very predictable based on the number of deals, how many appointments it's going to take to get those, how many leads you need to talk to get those appointments, down to the point, how many calls do you need to make to get them?
Yeah, good stuff. And I'm glad you brought up the why, because we have a lot of people that they kick the tires. They come in the community thinking they're going to get a couple deals right away. They're going to get some money in their pocket and they're going to be all good and happy and everything's rosy. Buying homes on terms is not all rosy. It's actually very hard to do. And you got to be patient and you got to have stick-to-itiveness, right? You got to be patient, and you got to have a strong why. You talk about that all the time. Our whys were strong enough where we stayed with it, and we were able to leave our W-2s because of our whys. There's a few that are in the community that have really strong whys, like Jessica and a Judy, right? Judy's on the verge of ending her W-2. And so she has a very strong why, right? But some don't have a really strong why, and you can tell because they don't make the dials, they don't put in the effort, they're not totally engaged. So if you want to join our community, we have a link in the show notes where you can click on that, get a strategy call with one of the coaches, and we can show you how we left our W-2. Rick, I appreciate you I appreciate you stepping in and being co-host with me today. I think we're going to do a couple more times here. So I appreciate it. You have any final thoughts and words of wisdom?
No, I think it's a very good session, a very good podcast, Rusty, and I appreciate being on in Steve's place for temporarily. Yep, appreciate it.
Awesome. I appreciate it. Rick, take care. We'll see everybody else on the other side.